Now, I've been watching all of these A&E biographies, did a whole recap and review on the Lex Luger one last week. I got some good feedback from that, so thank you for that. I was actually thinking about skipping the Degeneration X one, because I've heard this story so many times already. But I watched it. I thought it was a fine crash course in what DX was, if you are new to this, if you are a new fan, if you're not a fan. Otherwise, you don't really get much out of this that you didn't already hear 1,000 times, other than how bad things got personally for a lot of them, because they did interview Billy Gunn and Road Dogg and Shawn and all the key players, except China, for obvious reasons. So they do cover all of that stuff, and they have a lot of the key talking heads are all interviewed for this. They talked about the Clique to start things out before they even got into the DX stuff, because to have an understanding of DX, you must first know about the friendship and the relationship between these men, and you must know what the Clique is. And they talked about the Clique. They talked about Scott Hall and Kevin Nash leaving for WCW, and they covered the curtain call at Madison Square Garden. They have curtain calls on Broadway every single night. I guarantee you there has never been a curtain call talked about as much as this one. Triple H admits that he was supposed to win the King of the Ring tournament in 1996, and because Scott and Kevin left, and Shawn was the champion, all of the heat for the curtain call at MSG when they all hugged in the middle of the ring, all of the heat fell upon him. And Vince McMahon told him famously, "You're going to have to learn to eat shit and like the taste of it," which is what he did for the next 6 months. One interesting takeaway from all of this, and I don't recall them ever admitting to this in any of the other documentaries I've seen, is that Shawn Michaels losing his smile in February of 1997 and dropping the WWF title had nothing to do with his phony knee injury. Triple H flat out says in this episode his addiction problems were so bad by that point he had to step away or he was going to die. Now, I don't know if that means he went to rehab during that time. He wasn't gone for very long. He was back on television probably a month later, prancing around. I mean, he wasn't wrestling until, I think, late April or sometime in May. But by mid-March, he was already making appearances on TV. At WrestleMania, he was doing commentary for the main event. He was moving around pretty good for a guy who had such a potentially devastating career-ending knee injury. So I don't know if he ever actually went to rehab during that period or what. They didn't say. But the whole knee injury or the severity of the... I could buy maybe he had a minor knee injury, but the whole severity of the knee injury, I've been saying it for years, complete and total bullshit. The guy was a mess, and he did not want to drop the belt. Plain and simple. That's all it ever was. So it was nice to hear them finally admit to it, and not just say, oh, he had a career-ending knee injury, a potentially career-ending knee injury. No, he was all fucked up and he didn't want to lose, so then he lost his smile. DX is formed later in 97. I saw the Jim Cornette clip. There was a clip floating around from Cornette's show this week where he was running down, because anything with Cornette and Vince Russo that I see, I gotta listen to this, right? So there's a whole clip where Cornette is running down a list of Vince Russo creative ideas that Russo had written down and had pitched or was going to pitch to Vince McMahon. Because Cornette and Russo were both part of the creative team in WWE at that time. So Cornette kept all of his notes over the course of his career. He has every payoff he ever made, in what town it was in, the date, what the gate was, what the attendance was. He's like a savant with this stuff. The man basically has an entire museum of stuff in his house. But I heard this clip, and he says that it was Russo, at the end of this long list of mostly terrible ideas, who pitched the idea of Shawn Michaels and Triple H as a clique of their own on camera. You know, you would see them goofing off behind the scenes, and his thing was, let them do that on camera, and called themselves the Elite. Which is hilarious, looking back on it now, all these years later. Now we have, you know, a group that calls themselves the Elite. Russo said that they can call themselves the Elite, and you can put Road Dogg and Billy Gunn with them. Now, I also heard all the other ideas that Russo pitched, like having the Patriot turn heel and become a Japanese sympathizer and link up with Yokozuna, the Samoan who pretended to be Japanese, Some of these ideas were, or Yokozuna would join the Hart Foundation. Some of these ideas were just, my God. I can see why it was so important to have McMahon there as the filter for Russo, so he could take some of the few really good ideas and separate them out from all the terrible ones that he got pitched. So anyway, DX is formed in late 97. It appears to be a Russo idea. Just to let them go out there and be themselves. It's not like Russo was reinventing the wheel. He's like, just take these two together and let them do this shit on camera. It'll get over on its own. And Shawn's problems are well documented in this episode, and they got very bad. And I've heard the stories before about Triple H having to be his caretaker on the road and his babysitter and to watch after him. And there were many nights where Triple H would have to physically carry Shawn to his hotel room, put him in bed, take off, his clothes and make sure that his head was elevated so that he wouldn't vomit and choke on his own vomit. And he would check back on him periodically to make sure that he wasn't, choking and he was breathing and alive. And I mean, think about this. This is what life on the road was for Triple H for a period of months, when Shawn was at his worst. One of the key takeaways from this episode is just how fucked up everybody was, except for Triple H. Triple H was the straight edge guy when it came to the recreational drugs and the alcohol. He was the designated driver of this group. He was the one guy who kept his nose clean and never had any problems. He never had to go to rehab. He never went out on live TV high as a kite or slurring his speech or anything like that. He was the one member of DX who was not a complete and total embarrassment. Even as far back as 97, he was sitting in on production meetings. Vince McMahon let him sit in. In the episode, Triple H at one point was talking about being on a creative call. This would have been in 98. That's what he was doing. This guy clearly had designs on much bigger things, even going back 25 years. He had much higher aspirations. Meanwhile, he's doing this. All these other clowns, they're out partying and popping pills, making jackasses out of themselves, while Triple H is plotting his takeover. He was playing the long game. Only now is it really finally starting to pay off. But Triple H ended up taking over DX. Shawn, of course, had the back injury. What was really alarming to see? They had the highlights of the WrestleMania 14 press conference. And at the dais, you have Steve Austin, you have Shawn Michaels, you have Mike Tyson. Triple H is standing behind Shawn. And you look at Shawn. Look at how bloated his face is. So you can tell he was definitely on stuff. And he was not healthy. He just doesn't look healthy. He's not healthy at all. And so that's when his problems got really bad. He gutted through the WrestleMania match with Steve Austin, and then he was going to go away and he was going to have back surgery. And he did not have back surgery right away. He tried to just rehab it on his own. He ultimately ended up having back surgery. So now it's the night after WrestleMania, and Triple H is in the ring for one of the most important promos of his entire career. Because now Triple H is going to take over as the de facto leader of D-Generation X. Right now, there is no DX anymore. It's Triple H in China. Shawn is gone. Triple H is out there. And then he introduces Sean Waltman, who debuts as X-Pac. And that was huge. As somebody who was watching all of this at the time and flipping between the shows, but I was more of a WWF guy, to see Waltman walk out there. Waltman may not have been a name on the level of a Hulk Hogan or even a Hall or Nash or a Lex Luger. All these big names that would pop up on TV, on Raw and Nitro. He wasn't on that level. But he was the first major defection from WCW back to WWE. Usually it was going the opposite way. This was the first real statement like, wow, the pendulum looks like it may be swinging back the other way now. And I don't know that the second version of DX works without Waltman being part of that group. And then later that night, they added the New Age Outlaws. So in the span of just a couple of hours, DX went from 2 people, one of whom was a manager, to this whole brand new faction under the leadership of Triple H. And there have been many different incarnations of DX over the years. You have the original trio with Chyna. You have the Triple H-led version in 98. You have the McMahon-Helmsley era version of the group in 2000 with Tori and Stephanie. You have the reunion in 2006 with Hunter and Sean, and all the little DX reunions they tried to milk every fucking penny out of in the years that followed. Me personally, I have always been partial to that first Triple H-led version of DX in '98. That's my favorite version of DX. It's not the original, it's the one that came right after Shawn left, which is weird because Shawn Michaels is, he is really the biggest member of DX. The biggest and best member of DX was Shawn Michaels, the guy who effectively founded it. He created it. But I have always liked the second version of DX more than I have the first. Their feud with the Nation, Triple H's feud with The Rock, a lot of their, some of the funnier stuff they did on TV, I thought all of that was great. It was very entertaining. One of the things they did, and they do cover it here in the episode, was the DX invasion of WCW Monday Nitro, outside the Norfolk scope in April of '98. After this new DX is formed, about a month later, is when this all happened. WCW was running Norfolk for Nitro. WWE was running Hampton. And they came up with this idea to roll a tank down the street right outside of the scope to try to get into the building. They were going to try to do a literal invasion of Nitro. And they got out and they got a tank and they had a bullhorn. And this is the sort of thing they would absolutely not be able to get away with today. It was a very different world back then, riding a fucking tank down the street. They got out of the tank. They were talking to all the fans outside the building, all the Nitro fans. They were getting them to say, oh, we got our tickets for free to the show tonight. And they were asking them, who'd you really come to see? And they said, we came to see DX. And they got him to chant Bischoff sucks. And these are the people who were there to go to Nitro, right? So it was great. And they filmed all of this to put on Raw, and it was brilliant. But what would have been even more brilliant is if Eric Bischoff, when they rolled up to the building, would have actually let them in when they were asking to be let into the building. Instead, they had the gate come down to block them from getting into the building. Bischoff could have had an army of guys standing there on the other side of that gate, even with fucking pipes in their hand, not that they needed them, just waiting. And DX, they probably would have had these looks on their faces that would have been fucking priceless, like, oh shit. He didn't even need to have an army. He could have just had Meng standing there, and that would have been the end of DX. Meng and Scott Norton, just position them right in front of the gate. But really, what would they have done? They weren't going to do anything. Bischoff could have called their bluff, and it would have made for great TV. He could have aired it on Nitro that night and said the DX guys backed down like little, cowards. Now, this was all filmed earlier in the day before the show started. This did not happen when Nitro was live on the air, but that's not how Eric Bischoff tells the story in this episode. I guess he felt the comment that he made on the Goldberg episode about Goldberg's match with Bret Hart from Starrcade, that didn't make him look bad enough, so let's shovel even more bullshit onto the mound. And Bischoff now is like, oh man, I wish I didn't know, because I was in the ring on live television doing a promo with Hogan. I had no idea that any of this was happening. And the timeline doesn't really make a whole lot of sense there. But that's the story that Bischoff now tells. Oh man, yeah, I should have let them in. It would have been great. We would have put it on our show. But I just, I was in the ring and I just didn't know. It was some other guy who pulled the gate down. Give me a fucking break. Triple H made the comment as time went on that, there's a need for a Darth Vader in this company. We have Stone Cold, we have The Rock, right? Two huge baby faces. We don't have that one really big heel. And he wanted to be that guy. He wanted to be the Darth Vader in this company. Because he's smart enough to know that would have been a very lucrative position for him to be in. He'd get to work with all these guys. So he pitched it to Vince. The idea of going heel and DX coming to an end, and Vince went for it. This did not go over very well with the other members of DX. They were perfectly content to keep DX going. They were very happy. Waltman said they were making 6 figures on their quarterly merchandise checks. And he said, look, dude, go heel if you want, whatever, but don't affect our money. But Triple H's goals were much bigger than DX. They were bigger than just being stuck in this group for the next 5 or 10 years. He wanted to be the guy. He wanted to be the champion. It's not like a New Day thing where those guys have been together for like 7 or 8 years now. Right? New Day will never break up. Now, Kofi and Big E, they eventually did become WWE champion. But that's not what Triple H saw for himself. Being stuck in this group or wanting to be part of this one group for the next 3 or 5 years. He wanted to branch out on his own and become this mega heel. And then they covered the downfall of all the other DX members, not named Triple H. X-Pac refusing to go to rehab for a muscle relaxer problem that he had, and Road Dogg getting fired for his drug problems. Billy got fired. Chyna's issues. They glossed over a lot of the Chyna stuff. They mentioned her. And they did have clips from her mother talking about how she was when she was growing up and all that, but the Chyna stuff was really not dwelled on. Road Dogg talked about doing the Voodoo Kin Mafia stuff with Billy when they both went to TNA, and Triple H said, you know, people would come up to me and ask me, like, hey, did you hear what Brian and Billy said about you? Did you see that interview? They buried you. And Triple H said he would tell these people, like, guys, they're on drugs. They're popping pills. Like, you know, they're not in their right frame of mind. I remember that, by the way. And not just the TNA promos. It was the, I think it was an RF video shoot where they really just went all in and just buried Triple H. But if you think about it, you look at DX, the real prime run for DX was actually really short. It lasted less than 2 years before Triple H turned heel at WrestleMania 15. And took Chyna with him, and they went to they joined the corporate ministry. And look, they had a huge impact. The crotch chopping is something a lot of celebrities and athletes started doing because it was the cool thing to do, and DX was the cool thing at the time. I'm not denying the influence of DX, but in the debate on which one is better, or which one made more of an impact, which one was more influential on the wrestling business, I'm frankly shocked that it is even up for debate at all, whether the NWO was bigger or DX was bigger. This is not even up for debate as far as I'm concerned. The NWO was far bigger than DX. Not just in terms of the number of actual, like, literal members they had, which was ridiculous after a while, but just its overall influence and popularity, the way that it disrupted the business, single-handedly led to the most prosperous period in wrestling history. Stone Cold came later on, The Rock came later, but it was the NWO first. Even that fucking t-shirt. It's that one and the Austin 316 shirt. They got to be neck and neck as far as the highest-selling wrestling t-shirt of all time. Everybody, trust me when I say at the time, everybody was wearing those NWO shirts. The NWO is what led to Nitro kicking Raw's ass for 83 weeks. The NWO is why Eric Bischoff has a job today doing a podcast called 83 Weeks. It's the NWO over DX every day of the week. But that doesn't mean DX wasn't a major part of the success of the Attitude Era. It was. After the DX biography, I watched the Rivals episode with Triple H and Mick Foley. And again, it was good. It was just a rehashing of, you know, from start to finish, where they started out with their careers in the company, how they came together, their whole feuding from the first match they had at the King of the Ring in the finals in '97 when Triple H won the crown, to the very last match that they had, which was the Hell in a Cell match, the career versus title at No Way Out 2000, where Triple H put down Cactus Jack for what was supposed to be the final time. And the funniest part of this entire episode is, they tell stories, they tell their version of the story, and it would have been nice if that would have been where Foley ended things. That would have been a great story to tell. Like Ric Flair losing to Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania 24. What a great storybook ending that would have been for his career. But then reality sets in, and you can't tell that story without acknowledging the fact that those retirements were ruined by them coming back to the ring. They completely ignored the fact that only a month or so, month and a half, after that No Way Out match, not even a month and a half, they brought Foley back for WrestleMania 2000. Now, I can understand why they would want to, but it was comical. They built this whole ending of the episode around this great storybook ending for his career, and, you know, what a moment to go out. And Foley is like, as I'm laying there in the hole in the ring when he got backdropped from the top of the cell, you know, down into the ring, and they had the ring break. I'm laying there thinking, man, we had a good one. This is a great way, right? Perfect way for my career to end. You would never know if you're a brand new viewer. You would never know that it was only a few weeks later they called this fucking guy to come back. Foley thought he was done. He had every expectation of being retired and done and putting over Triple H, and that's it, right? He even got his hair cut. He had that crappy haircut. And then he got called in because they wanted a McMahon in every corner, so we're going to dangle the carrot of a WrestleMania main event and a WrestleMania main event payoff, and he came back for one match. And frankly, wasn't very good, and it was one of those little blemishes on his career. The comeback with Randy Orton in 2004 was actually much, much better. But yeah, it's unfortunate they brought him back for WrestleMania 2000, but for those wondering if they even acknowledged it, the answer is no. In their world, in their telling of the story, it doesn't even exist. It's the perfect creative booking for the end of this feud between two guys who are very influential in each other's careers, more so Foley with Triple H. Mick Foley is the one who made Triple H. And Triple H, you know, he acknowledges that here in this episode, and he says what Foley did for him was huge because Foley had credibility as a main eventer that he didn't have yet. He needed to have that first big program with a major name who he could beat and he could go toe-to-toe with, and in the eyes of the fans, it would give him credibility that up to that point he did not have, even though he was the champion. People didn't necessarily see him that way. They didn't accept him that way. I can tell you from my experience, watching that street fight at the Royal Rumble in Madison Square Garden is the night that I first truly looked at Triple H as a headline guy. It wasn't until that match that night after it was over that I said, man, that was, first of all, that was a great match, number one. One of the greatest in Royal Rumble history. And number two, okay, this was his arrival. He was already the champion, but this was Triple H's arrival here with this Royal Rumble match. But their careers were intertwined a lot even before that, going back to 97, the King of the Ring. They had a match at the Canadian Stampede pay-per-view. They had the cage match at SummerSlam in 97. They had the debut of Cactus Jack on Raw the month after that at Madison Square Garden. It was against Triple H. They had a whole bunch of matches that year. And those were also very important for Triple H. Because Triple H was, and this was right before DX started, but up to that point, Triple H was just the blue blood guy. This was the first time he really had a chance to go out there and show a mean streak and show aggression that we hadn't seen from him before. So Foley did him the favors even in 97. Long before Triple H was a world champion. And then once he was a world champion, what did they do? They came right back to Foley. So at every turn, Foley did this guy so many favors over the years. He really, in a lot of ways, he owes his career in many ways to Mick Foley. You know, maybe he would have gotten there anyway, even without him. But what Foley did for him was very selfless. And not everybody in that position that Foley was in at that time would have been as giving as he was to Triple H. But they had some fantastic matches together. I thought it was a good episode. Just very comical the way that it ended. We had a little reunion with them. I like how they do the reunions at the end. They did that with Brett and Sean in their episode, where at the very end they kind of come together in the modern day, and you know they talk to each other for a few minutes. So Foley and Triple H were sitting around just shooting the shit, and it was good to see, because there have been comments over the years. I don't know if there was heat there, and Triple H, you know, not necessarily acknowledging what Foley did for him, but he went out of his way to make it very clear in this episode that what Mick did for him was huge in his career.